Today we're going to be looking at the City Premier, a mid-size four-wheeler from Babyjogger. There are a couple of models from Babyjogger that we're pretty crazy about, but both are three-wheelers. And in general we find that once one moves into the four-wheeler category, the competition starts to get a bit stiffer. Mid-size, reversible seat, four-wheel, swivel wheel strollers are arguably the most common type of stroller found on the current market. That being said, there are a couple of things that make the City Premier stand out. Firstly, as a Babyjogger, you get access to their quick fold system, which is my favorite central folding mechanism of all time. And secondly, and perhaps more importantly, the City Premier comes in at a significantly lower price point than a lot of the strollers we tend to review on this channel. And yet it has many of the functions of strollers which cost a lot more, while maintaining, for the most part, a pretty high level of engineering. Before we start really getting into it though, here are some stats. The City Premier clocks in at 13 kilos. It's 34 by 81 by 63 centimeters when folded down. It takes up to 22 kilos in the seat and 7 kilos in the underslung basket. These are pretty standard stats for a mid-size stroller. Slightly on the heavy side, but not excessively. And that extra weight is mostly the metal central fold, which is a good thing. Before we get going on the mechanics of the stroller, I'd like to say a few things about the comfort for both you and your child. The seat is of a pretty average size in comparison to other mid-size strollers. It's a bucket seat, meaning that the whole frame shifts position rather than altering the angle of the spine in relation to the base. The footrest is adjustable in length, but only slightly. Textiles are of a decent quality. Babyjogger textiles in general have a tendency to sunfade a bit quicker than some other brands. This problem can be somewhat mitigated with waterproofing or weather protection sprays, but still, it's something to take into consideration. With regards to folding, as I've said, you get Babyjogger's patented quick fold system, though it does involve a couple extra steps than their three-wheeled models. A big part of the reason for this being that it has an easy fold the seat but leave it on the chassis system, similar to the Cybex Pream. This is actually quite a nice function, particularly for people who have cars, as it makes taking the stroller in and out of the car just that much easier. This is also one of those points where I would like to point out that the price on this model is significantly less than a Pream, despite it sharing one of the Pream's key advantages. Driving-wise, the City Premier is on the better end of the market for mid-size strollers. Not quite as good as it's advertised, of course. It's become a thing for virtually every new stroller that comes out to be advertised as an all-terrain stroller with fantastic suspension. While really, I could probably count on two hands the strollers I'd actually classify as all-terrain, and none of them would be from this class. Mid-size four-wheel swivel wheel combined with all-terrain is an oxymoron. For true all-terrain, in my opinion, you need either a heavyweight four-wheel swivel wheel stroller, a four-wheel fixed-wheel stroller, or really preferably a three-wheeler or a dedicated sports stroller. That being said, the City Premier does have larger than average front wheels and a dedicated rear suspension mechanism, so it will tolerate some light terrain without being too bumpy. We'll talk a bit more about this later when looking at the mechanics of the model. One other note on driving is that although the handle is extendable, I personally think it ought to have extended another 2 to 3 inches to be really comfortable, and also to give that little extra bit of leverage for getting up curbs and over obstacles and stuff. It's not a big deal, but if you're on the tall side, then test one out before you buy it. Okay, let's get down to the mechanics, starting with the handle and the central folding mechanism. With regards to the handle, it has the telescopic system, which has advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are that you don't have a hinged handle height adjustment mechanism on the side that can loosen over time and has a tendency to break. Disadvantages with this are that you need internal wires within the telescopic handle in order to adjust it, and those can on occasion break. So mechanically there's advantages and disadvantages. Overall, it's quite nice to have a telescopic handle from sort of a terrain and sporting point of view, as it makes it a little bit easier to get the leverage you need to get up over terrain. I do, as I mentioned earlier, think that the handle should have been a little bit longer out. So again, if you're tall, you should test one out before you buy it. With regards to the central locking mechanism, I've long been a fan of Babyjogger's central locking mechanism. It's pretty much all metal inside, and it's actually relatively simplistic for what it's attempting to do, which is to make a system that's incredibly easy to fold down and snap back up into place, where all three of the extending elements of the chassis move in unison in order to find the proper positions as it locks into place. One additional nice thing with the City Premier is the shape of the bars. So one of the problems you do sometimes get on City Elite and City Mini GT is that the older round system of the bar is a little bit less mechanically or structurally sound than what you have going on here, and does on occasion break. Sometimes you break the handle things on a City Elite or a City Mini. But because they've changed the angle of these bars, it means that they're kind of attempting to address this problem in retrospect, which is always a good sign that they're doing their job of looking into sort of after sales numbers and so on in order to get the engineering as improved as possible. From a mechanical perspective, the seat unit is a little bit on the complex side. A lot of the mid-size strollers that have adjustable seats like this have a lot of complex mechanisms in order to do this. Of course, the addition of that fold with the seat on effect introduces a lot more small complex mechanisms within the seat unit itself. So generally, complexity and small mechanisms is a bad thing from the point of view of mechanics, simply because there are more things that can go wrong and it's easy for them to break. But I haven't noticed any really particular problems with the seat unit on the City Premier yet. But again, as I said, anytime you have that added complexity, there is a potential for problems in the future. Okay, looking at the lower rear end of the City Premier, this is one of the few Babyjogger models that actually does have some dedicated suspension, but since the tires and the wheels and the overall structure of the chassis are quite different than a lot of the three-wheelers, even with this dedicated suspension unit, it does not feel particularly terrain capable. It's decent if you're using it in an urban or a smooth suburban environment, but it's not going to give you real terrain capability, despite the suspension element. The brake system is quite standard for Babyjogger. It is activated up at the handle level. It is a relatively complex system if you're thinking about fixing it on your own. Luckily, Babyjogger does provide replacement parts where you can buy the entire lower bar and the brake handle with the wire attached as one unit, but of course that does cost some money. In order to keep the brake system working properly, it does take a certain amount of lubrication and maintenance. With relation to the front end, there are a couple things I like and a couple things that I don't like. Number one, it has some decent suspension here, and it has larger front wheels. So again, this would suggest a certain amount of terrain capability. Unfortunately, this is sort of canceled out by the thing I dislike mainly about the front end, which is that the fork in general is actually quite heavy, and there's no inbuilt protection against developing wobbly problems. Wobbly problems occur when overuse, the axle starts to widen out the housing inside here, and thus the connection between the fork and the front frame loosens, and then if you go at increased speeds, you can develop a wobbly wheel problem. And a lot of manufacturers of four-wheel swivel front wheel strollers have started to put in suspension pads and different sorts of things within this housing in order to protect that problem from occurring. You don't actually have that here. On the other hand, though, the larger wheels does give a certain amount of added terrain capability, but keep it to urban and light suburban environments in order to protect against that wobbly wheel problem starting to occur. The other thing I sort of dislike about the front end on the stroller is the swivel locks, which are actually sort of an overcomplicated version of a very old school design. You press in this button, which is kind of unnecessary, and then slide this entire panel over in order to push the pin up. And the tracking here is held in place only with these two screws. I've been seeing this more or less this exact model of a swivel lock design for at least 10, 12-year-old, if not 15-year-old strollers. It is a little bit overcomplicated, and it's not the best design. It's not the worst either, but it's a little bit unnecessary. Okay, a couple notes on the wheels themselves. As I said, I do like the fact that they have larger front wheels, but overall I'm a little bit dissatisfied with the wheels. They're not particularly bad, but I feel that the ribbing here in the rim is a little bit thin, which is more likely to lead to accidents in which the rim actually breaks. In addition, while they had really nice foam-filled tires on both the City Elite and the City Mini GT, they've now gone back to a pure foam sort of a setup, which does get kind of ugly and worn down a lot faster than the foam-filled tire setup. So where do we place the Babyjogger City Premier then? Well, to start with, let me just say that I'm generally not a huge fan of mid-size strollers. If I need swivel wheels and a reversible seat, I'd much rather go bigger and get a heavyweight like the Stolka Trails, or an Emelunga NXT90, or even better, a used Buffalo if I can find one in good condition. If it's about size and weight, I'd rather go for a three-wheeler like the City Elite. That being said, if you've already determined a mid-size reversible seat four-wheel swiveling front wheel stroller to be the right stroller for your lifestyle, if you live in a smooth urban or suburban environment, need something large enough to handle some shopping, but small and light enough to fit in the car or carry easily up the stairs, then there are certain advantages to the City Premier, simply because it incorporates a variety of tried and tested mechanisms and design characteristics from the rest of the Babyjogger line. It folds easily with the seat attached, and it's affordable. I would place it below the Boogaboo Fox for mechanics and functionality in the mid-size class, but really on par or above most other similar strollers. Mechanically, it is certainly sturdier than the Bugaboo Chameleon and the Cybex Pream, both of which are around twice the price. In any case, we hope you found this video interesting, and if you did, we ask that you subscribe, as it helps us to continue making videos in the future. Thank you.